Welcome to the Master of None podcast. Adventures in a hands-on life. Build. Grow. Cook. Train. Explore. Welcome back, everyone. It's been a while since we've done any real serious physical training episodes, so that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. Specifically, we're starting a discussion on building an obstacle course. This is actually going to end up being a two-part series. So today we're going to talk about what an obstacle course actually is, some of the reasons why you might consider building or using an obstacle course, and also some of the design factors that are going to go into that obstacle course, whether it's something you're building yourself or improvising from the environment around you. So that's kind of what we're doing today. In the second part of the conversation, we're going to talk about the specific obstacles that we are designing and building, why we're choosing those obstacles, what aspects of our fitness each of those obstacles target, and also how you can have your own obstacle course even if you don't have a large amount of space to build one. Whether you live in a home with a backyard in a suburban area or a tiny apartment in an urban area, it doesn't matter. You'll be able to improvise your own obstacle course. So that's what we're getting into today. No, that's what we're getting into next time in the second half. We also have a guest joining us today. Courtney Gordon is back on the podcast. She did her undergrad in biology and biochemistry at Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and she followed that up with a physician assistant degree from Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. So, being a physician assistant, it's always fun to get her on the podcast, especially whenever we're talking about anything that has to do with health, physiology, fitness, that type of stuff. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our discussion, and I hope you all enjoy it. You were saying about obstacle courses? Don't stop now. Go for it.
Don't stop. Okay.
So you've told me before about going to camp. So tell me some camp stories. How did you end up at camp? What do you do at camp? Because I know they have obstacle courses at camp, right?
Yes, there was a time we totally did an obstacle course over at camp. That was fun. So, I went to this camp in Western Michigan for years. It was fun. I always ended up going with the same individuals every year, and you'd play capture the flag, eat way too much ice cream, go swimming, compete with each other for who can swim the fastest and front crawl, backstroke, all sorts of stuff like that. Get to go boating and tubing. It was just a fun time.
Nice. So I went to camp too, but I think, like we were talking about earlier, our camp experiences were very different.
Very different.
We did some boating also.
Yeah.
And we had swim competitions also.
Yeah.
But there were people like yelling at us and making us hold bricks over our head.
While you were swimming?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And making us like wake up early in the morning by banging trash cans together and screaming. And
that sounds like a fun way to get up.
It's a fun camp experience.
No, it's not a fun camp experience.
It was really fun.
It was really fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I would do it again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we did...
we did obstacle courses too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is we did an obstacle course. So
tell me about your obstacle course experience. What was your favorite obstacle? What was your nemesis obstacle? Because everybody has that one obstacle on the obstacle course that they're like, ugh.
So.
The dirty name.
One of the...
We'll get to that later. Name obstacle.
I've been on a couple different obstacle courses. Not a lot, but a couple different ones. One of them at camp was a ropes course. And so you'd go up with all the camp counselors and, well, I was a camp counselor at the time. So we went up in this ropes course and we were basically learning to trust each other. And you would clip together and you'd have to do these obstacles paired together. So me and another individual were hooked together. Oh, we had a whole bunch. We had
hooking together seems more dangerous. Or was one of you on the ground belaying the other one, or were you just tied together?
Well, we were tied to the
By the neck or
That-
the waist?
it was a 3-foot cable between our waists, and we were both hooked in at the top too.
Static or elastic cable?
Definitely a static cable.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we were all hooked together, and we had to like help each other through different obstacles in the air. It was very interesting. And orientation leader when I was an orientation leader for college. So basically, I was the person that was the fun individual that you met when your parents dropped you off.
I did that too.
Yeah, you did? Mm-hmm. Wow. You were one of the orientation leaders?
That's not what they called us.
No, but they call you.
They called us Swab Summer Cadre.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
So-
and I was one of the fun individuals that the recruits met when their parents dropped them off. Never to see them again.
So I basically, it was fun. We would take
It was
tours.
super fun.
Yeah, taking tours of the college, learning where you would call the mess hall, we would call just the dining room where we would go, where your room was, all that stuff. It was fun. So we would do obstacle courses together. Like the orientation leaders would do obstacle courses together before we had a whole bunch of students. And then once we had the students, we would then do fun stuff like that with them.
That's fun. So, like, would you call it, and we're going to get into what an obstacle course actually is, whatever. It's a very broad term.
Yes.
So, what you're talking about, would you call that more of an obstacle course or like a challenge trust course? 'Cause the obstacle course I think of as being like more of like a route that you run as an individual, usually, but not always, because sometimes you're in the team and you're carrying a 220-pound dummy on a stretcher through the obstacles. Anyway, usually I think of an obstacle course being like a single course that you run on your own, and you have these obstacles that you have to like run through or over or under or whatever, versus like a challenge course, which is more of a team oriented thing with like things like trust fall and
It was
like
definitely team oriented. It was
Okay.
an obstacle course, but it was specifically meant for team building, not necessarily personal individual goal orientation.
Gotcha. Not so much for like fitness necessarily as
No.
team building.
Team building.
Okay. So maybe now would be a good time to talk about what an obstacle course is.
So an obstacle course
And this is coming from
This is coming from Wikipedia because I did not like Webster's definition. It was very lame.
not that we didn't like already know what an obstacle course is, or that most of the listeners don't know what an obstacle course is, but sometimes Wikipedia is a really good place to like look up like honestly a definition of something when you're like, I'm just trying to put words to what this thing is. Let me just look it up, see what somebody else says about it.
Right.
So hit me with the Wikipedia definition.
Absolutely. This is not a peer-reviewed article by any means, but an obstacle course is a series of challenging physical obstacles an individual, team, or animal must navigate, usually while being timed. Obstacle courses can include running, climbing, jumping, crawling, swimming, and balancing elements with the aim of testing speed, endurance, and agility.
Nice. I hadn't really thought about the animal aspect of it. Now that I think about it, I'm sure they're mostly talking about like dog trials at dog shows. What I was actually visualizing is taking one of our pack goats through a military obstacle course. And
It'd be like that 220-pound dummy you had to pull through that one time.
probably worse. Probably a lot
man.
worse. So, that's actually a really good definition of an obstacle course. So why are we talking so much about obstacle courses? Well, we're going to build one. Woo! So this episode is going to be more of a planning episode, and we're going to talk about kind of our plan and some of the specific obstacles that we're going to construct. And
Create.
yep. And also like some alternatives for people who might not have quite as much space as we do, or even alternatives for people who don't have any space at all.
Yes.
So if you have like a small backyard, you can still do some of this. Mm-hmm. And if you have like no backyard, like maybe you live in a apartment with no outdoor area at all, we're going to give you some pointers on creating your own outdoor obstacle course. We're not going to do one through your apartment, although knock yourself out. That'd be pretty awesome. Send me
awesome.
pictures if you do.
Yeah, totally.
That'd be cool. Indoor apartment obstacle course.
Couch cushions.
Yeah. You like have a cargo net like bolted to the ceiling and you're like Spider-Manning along your ceiling. That'd be pretty fun.
That'd be so fun.
So anyway, we have some more space. So we're going to utilize some of that space to build our own obstacle course. So we kind of brainstormed earlier today while we were talking about this, and we wrote down some of the benefits of an obstacle course. Like why build an obstacle course instead of just
an in-home gym?
Right, a gym or a gym membership or just going for a run. All of those are great things, but I think you can add a lot to your life by utilizing an obstacle course.
Also, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, or even instead of, like, I forget exactly what I said to you, but somebody who actually like builds and uses their own obstacle course consistently is going to be a much tougher, harder human being than somebody who just goes to spin class. Nothing against spin class.
Absolutely. Especially when it's -20 and blowing snow. I'm just saying, I'd rather be in the comfort of the
obstacle course. And don't let this dissuade
this
dissuade any of you from building or using an obstacle course. But like, you're probably going to get some splinters and some rope burns and some cuts and bruises, and that will make you tougher. It will make you a better person.
I'm planning on just wearing gloves
and a helmet.
I'll be that kid who needs to wear the helmet.
Why is she wearing a helmet?
Well, it will increase my balance. So, it'll be helpful. All right, let's talk about
this. You can take it off when you actually run for time, and you'll improve your time by not having a big helmet on your head.
Yeah, exactly. That's
anyway
not at all what I was thinking. But
the obstacle course will make you tougher just because the skin on your hands is literally going to get tougher from all of the contact with logs and boards and rope and pipe and barbed wire. And just kidding, we're probably not going to go that far.
That would be quite an obstacle course.
Yeah, it's also
barking dogs chasing you too.
Mm-hmm. Spotlights, live fire. Yep, whole thing. Maybe not. Anyway, so back to what we were talking about. Why use an obstacle course? So the first thing that I wrote down was agility.
Yes.
Now, actually, let's take a step back. Let's go ahead and do a little disclaimer. An obstacle course is something that you can absolutely get hurt or injured on very easily.
We weren't kidding about the helmet. Like, you literally can crack your head and get very injured.
So I'm not going to wear a helmet, but that should have nothing to do with the decisions that any of you make. You need to, first of all, before engaging in any sort of physical exertion, I highly encourage you to consult with your physician. And if you are at risk of anything, like bearing children, do what your doctor tells you, right?
Yep.
And then make good choices about how you construct and utilize any obstacles that you might choose to build. So there you go. There's your disclaimer. Be smart. And on this podcast, we're literally just telling you what we are doing, not suggesting anything that you should or should not do in any way. So there you go. You get to come along with us on our adventure of splinters and banged up shins and rope burns
which I'm sure that will all happen.
Yep. As we embark on our obstacle journey.
Right? I like that. Yes.
So, as we were brainstorming, back to why. The first thing that I wrote down was agility. So, you being kind of a medical person who went to doctor school.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about agility from like a more scientific perspective. Like what do medical science people say that agility is?
Well, so I'm a PA. I did go to medical school. I make fun of it and call it doctor school all the time. So agility It involves kind of the reactive abilities in unpredictable environments. So it's like rapid whole body movement with change in velocity or direction in response to some sort of external stimuli.
That's a very sciencey way to talk about it. And I think that's kind of one of those things that most people know it when they see it.
Right.
Like agility when it comes to sports or whatever. Cats tend to be agile.
Yep. Until their ninth life.
More agile than hedgehogs.
Yes.
Not an agile animal. I also wrote down balance.
Ooh,
so
balance.
This one we actually had a little bit of a longer conversation about when I wrote that down.
Yes,
so
we did.
Tell me what the sciencey version of balance is, and then we'll talk about some of my opinions and kind of how I describe balance.
So like balance is being able to have control over your body, like your body weight, keeping it stable as you move. It comes from core strength for the most part, the muscle group that keeps you steady as you walk, stand, and move around.
Okay. And the way that I described balance was kind of a three-legged stool.
Yes.
Which is funny because if a stool has two legs, do you know what it can't do?
Stand up.
Balance. It can't balance.
Da-da.
Okay. So anyway, kind of a three-legged stool that has three critical components.
Yes.
One of those components is, like you were talking about, the core strength. So that's kind of the output side of it.
Right. There's also input to being able to have balance
exactly,
too. Yes.
Which comes from probably more inputs, but primarily your eyes, your inner ear, and your sense of touch. So actually the contact between, say, your feet and the ground, or your hands and the ground if you're walking on your hands.
Absolutely.
And kind of the combination of those three. And there can actually be other more subtle things that play into it too, like the wind moving the hair on the back of your neck can actually subtly play into it too. We'll call those inputs. And then there's the connection between the input and the output.
Right.
Which is kind of
it's kind of like what your cerebellum does.
Whose bellum?
The cerebellum.
Sarah's war.
So the cerebellum, or the cerebellar cortex, it's in the back of your brain, but right, the brainstem attached to it in the back. So it controls your balance for the most part. So like you're saying, there are input, there's like the vestibular receptors, like in the inner ear, the semicircular canals. That's like the part of your inner ear that actually tells you if your head's tilted or if you're standing upright, if you're doing a spin, like flipping through the air, you're some sort of diver going into the water. You can feel that you're spinning through the air, and that's what tells you that you're spinning. There's also proprioceptors. So the bottom of your feet, like you're saying, the sense of touch, but your vision is a really big part of that too, of being able to see where you are, see how things are moving around you. And you have two eyes, and both of your eyes both of your eyes.
You have two eyes.
I do have two eyes. So you have depth perception because you're able to see.
You have depth perception.
I have depth perception because I'm able to see from two different angles. So
I think
actually,
our listeners probably have no idea what I'm talking about.
They really don't. So
I'm monocular and have no depth perception, which actually, along these same lines, when I lost vision in one eye.
Monocular means one eye. He can see out of one eye. Mono.
When I lost vision in one eye, actually took me a while. It was like a huge hit to my balance.
Yes.
And took a while to kind of start compensating for that. All sorts of other fun things too, with like hallucination. And we'll talk about that another time.
You had a rough go.
Anyway.
So vision, proprioception, and then the inner vestibular or inner ear workings allow you to get input to your cerebellum. And then your output, what's really interesting is the motor neurons don't start in the cerebellum, but they go through it. So the cerebellum actually like tweaks the little movement. So when you have your motor cortex says, oh, move your hand to reach out to grab a glass, your cerebellum says, like precisely where it is, how hard do you grab the glass, how quickly do you move it. It's move your hand to get to the glass. It fine tunes all of that.
So that's kind of the neuro connection between the input and the output, right?
Right. But the cerebellum also adjusts the core musculature to be able to compensate for shifts in body weight and positions and like the load on the muscles. Like you're saying, when you're outside and the wind is blowing really hard, you're going to tilt your body slightly into the wind to be able to keep your balance. That's something that the cerebellum does.
Cool. So of those three things,
Yes.
there's really not much you can do personally other than like wearing your glasses or contacts if you need glasses or contacts, or that's the input side of it. There's really not much you can do to improve that side of it, right?
What about your shoes?
Oh, okay. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Okay, let's skip that for now.
Okay.
Good point. Excellent point. Yeah, let's come back to that for sure. So, physiologically, with your body, there's not a whole lot you can do to kind of train the input side to be better.
You cannot train the input side to be better. No.
Now, there's a lot you can do to exercise your core muscles to be stronger, and you can build a lot of core strength even just in a home gym with one kettlebell or a bucket of water or something. There's a whole lot you can do to improve your core strength.
Absolutely.
Even different like body weight exercises that you can do even without having a kettlebell. So there's a lot you can do on that side.
What's really interesting though is you can do all that stuff for your core strength, and it'll also help your balance too, like, standing on one leg and practicing that. But at some point, all these different activities and all these different exercises that you do, you kind of like limit out the increase of balance. You're going to increase in balance, but eventually you're going to plateau doing the same exercises over and over again.
Only focusing on one of those three legs of that stool that we were talking about. You also need to train and actually create the neural pathways between the inputs and outputs. And what's one of the best ways to do that? An obstacle course, right?
Changing up activity and making it fun and getting out there moving.
Right.
Absolutely.
So put that core exercise to use. Practice with it as you're vaulting, climbing, all of that stuff. So that's kind of that's where I was going with that one when we wrote down balance as one of the whys for why use or build an obstacle course. So we also wrote down core strength, which we kind of already talked about, but we can, because we're using that core strength on these obstacles, not only are we helping those neuro pathways, which help with our balance and agility and all of that, but we're exercising our core strength too. So it's going to continue to improve that core strength in a more, a more functional way than just using the kettlebells.
Well,
I'm a big fan of kettlebells, don't get me wrong, but go ahead.
But at the same time, you can also do the obstacles in different ways. So if you're going to vault over something or move over something, you can move your body different ways doing it, so you can continuously change the exercise, allowing different muscle groups to kind of be more fit.
Right. For example, let's say monkey bars.
Ooh, yes.
Okay. And you could have a set of monkey bars, and you could use them the traditional way of swinging monkey-like from bar to bar underneath by your hands. Or the next time, or the next lap around the course, let's say you do traditional under the monkey bars the first lap, and then you do another lap and you go over the monkey bars.
Right.
And then you do another lap and you weave the monkey bars.
Right.
Alternating between going over and under each bar.
Right. Or even if you can't quite get there yet, skipping one of the monkey bars. So you're doing every other. There's lots of different options where you're using muscles in different ways.
Or even two-handing each monkey bar.
Right.
Where instead of swinging from bar to bar, you have two hands on the bar and you swing your body, let go, and then grab the next bar with two hands. Swing, let go, grab the next bar with two hands. There's so many different ways to use each of these obstacles.
Right.
And that's something as simple as monkey bars.
Right. Well, that brings us to the next one of like upper body strength or even lower body strength. What is really interesting with physical fitness is you do not maintain. You're either going to be getting stronger or you're going to be getting weaker if you're actively trying to get yourself stronger or not.
Right. Yeah, you don't stop exercising and stay at your current level.
Right.
Right. So, and I'm going to say for anybody who's really looking to increase their lower body strength, an obstacle course is probably not the way to do it. Just because really working on your lower body strength requires such huge amounts of weight that's not really something that either body weight exercises or cardio or obstacle courses are going to help a lot with.
Right.
Just squat heavy is the way to work on your lower body strength.
Right. Well, I mean, you bring up a good point. Like the running, it's more aerobic exercise. I mean, that exercise is for your heart, right? It's for your heart health, decreasing your risk of heart attack and stroke. But what's interesting about weight-bearing exercise, so those are exercises where, excuse me, you're either running against some sort of like ground or pavement, or you're actually lifting weights, or you're physically touching something and kind of pulling your muscles really hard against the bones. Mm-hmm. Not only does that increase your muscle strength, it also increases your bone as well. It actually stimulates the bone to grow more bone. So your bones get thicker.
Like actually preventing osteoporosis.
Literally preventing osteoporosis.
Or preventing even just generally weak bones and
absolutely
making you less prone to fractures. That's
right?
what they're called.
Well, stronger muscles a lot of times can also decrease your risk of getting injured in all sorts of different things. Like in a fall, if you have stronger muscles and better bones, you're not going to be as likely to have a break or some sort of sprain or injury.
Not to mention some of the other ones that we've talked about, like balance and agility,
right,
are also going to make you less likely to be injured or less likely to even experience the fall or the impact or whatever it is.
Right. The same fall that somebody has if they're physically fit, at 60 could be completely different than somebody who's not at 60.
Right. And also, like, just because someone had good balance when they were 20 or 30,
right,
and then they haven't exercised those neural pathways in cerebellum that you're talking about. When you're 60 or 70, just because you really had great balance back in your 20s, like, you cannot count on that to be worth anything because you actually have not exercised those neural pathways in decades.
What's interesting that you bring that up, there were some studies that were done of people who do the same exercises over and over, like runners and cross-country skiers. Mm-hmm. They actually have the balance of an individual who doesn't exercise. And then when you take in like dancers and gymnasts and I don't remember what the other parts of that study were, they actually have better balance because they have a more varied routine instead of your brain kind of just saying, okay, I'm running, this is what we're doing. Very interesting.
Can you say running again? It was a little Forrest Gumpy.
Running. Like that? You like that?
So, also we should mention when you're talking about runners, and this is not something that's like scientifically repeated and peer reviewed that they're like, oh, this is fact. This is like kind of a general thing that somebody found in a study.
Right.
And this is specifically like their test group for runners was specifically on a track.
Right.
And basically limiting it to people who only did that and didn't also do an obstacle course.
Or run on trails.
Right.
Or go run outside in the grass in the park or something. It's just on cement or on trails. Yeah.
Another study has also shown like significant difference between the balance of people who run only on a track and the balance of people who run on uneven terrain. Or even the difference in the natural balance abilities of people who grow up only walking on the sidewalk.
Right. Or in parks, flat parks.
And paved surfaces and mowed grass versus people who walk over irregular terrain
Right.
outdoors, like
So this,
rocks and clumps of grass and all of that.
right. The study that I was talking about actually recommended that runners start running on trails intermittently and start running on uneven ground to kind of vary things up to increase their balance.
So, kind of a side note, and we're going to do an upcoming episode or two on running. But the running trail that we have created on our property, I actually really like because it's fairly flat. So
That uphill gets you.
You can actually run. I'm not even talking about the uphill versus downhill. Yeah. It's not level for sure, but the surface of the ground itself is flat enough that you feel like you can actually run without risking like tripping over a tree trunk or something.
Where's your agility? Come on.
But let's throw some tree trunks down there. Well, that's what we're doing with the obstacle course, right? We're adding some tree trunks.
Yes.
But the actual surface of the ground is still these kind of like beaten down like clumps of grass and shrubs and stuff along this little trail. So it's like every step you have to gauge the angle that your foot is going to land on and the little variations in the terrain. It is nothing like running on a good modern high-tech, high quality like rubber, like the chip rubber tracks.
Right.
Like practice running on a rough trail, get good at that, and then go run on a track, and it will feel amazing.
So will my time get better if I run on a track?
For sure. And the track is also level. So you wouldn't think it would make that much difference, but it does. Because we have, it's actually exactly a third of a mile loop. And around that third of a mile, it goes from basically a high point to a low point. There's some little ups and downs, but nothing major. The major thing is just from one end to the other. There's probably, I kind of looked at it today.
Yeah. What is that?
I think it's between 15 and 20 feet, actually. I'm going to say, let's say conservatively 15, 16 foot elevation difference from the high end to the low end. So
It gets you.
right, and translating that number down, like think about if you were playing football on a football field that actually had like a 5 or 8 foot difference from one end of the field to the other. Like that would be a huge advantage for the team that was running downhill.
Absolutely.
Right? Like you're talking about a high school team being able to dominate a college team, maybe, I don't know, with that much of a slope
Right.
going down the football field. So it's like, over the course of a third of a mile, you're only going up and down 15, 20 feet. It doesn't sound like much, but trust me, it's enough to really slow down your time
Right.
versus a flat track. And you're really feeling it, especially on the uphill. It seems like on the downhill portion, almost feels like you're running on a flat. And then the uphill portion just feels like you're running uphill.
Yeah.
So
Well, you are.
anyway, what I was mostly talking about though is just the unevenness of the ground surface
Right.
on that track where you actually have to pay attention. You actually have to be looking and feeling and constantly adjusting the way that your foot's landing on each step.
Right.
And the studies have shown that people who train on rougher, more uneven terrain just naturally have much better balance.
Which makes
Especially
sense.
kids.
Yes.
Kids who grow up only ever walking on flat floors, sidewalks, paved surfaces, and mowed parks have naturally much less balance and agility than kids that grow up running through the woods or even through clumpy grass or rocks or whatever. Right. So that's kind of where we were going with that part of it. Some of those, let's talk about these. Functional strength and natural movement. We've kind of already talked about those a little bit.
Yes.
And I guess a lot of that is kind of common sense, how an obstacle course would contribute to your functional strength and natural movement.
Well, we've kind of all met those gym rats who, they work out in the gym a whole bunch and then they just can't quite seem to, I don't know how to say it. Basically where they'll come over and they'll help do stuff, but they aren't able to really transition their workout into actually being able to functionally use that strength to do something.
Right. Like we are splitting firewood.
Right.
How much time have you spent in the gym working on exercises that help you be really good at splitting firewood?
Right.
Or carrying the logs or moving the wheelbarrow or climbing up a mountain or carrying a heavy backpack.
Right. They come over and like try to help, but they look so awkward because they've never really done those movements before. So
Right.
yeah.
Well, and a lot of that is neurological and creating the neural pathways to use that strength that they've built. And if you ignore that portion of it, you might have a lot of strength, but it's not necessarily functional strength.
Right.
So
What's really interesting about the cerebellum is it's like a tenth, like 10%, right, of your brain, but it has like 50% of the neural pathways of the entire brain. It's fascinating.
well, and it has to work so fast.
Yeah.
Too, because you're talking about split second, like almost instantaneous
Right. It's
transmission
reflex.
from the input to the output.
Yeah.
We're talking about those inputs versus the output and using your core strength and all that. It has to be almost instantaneous to translate to agility and
Right.
balance.
Absolutely. It's more of a reflex versus anything else. Definitely not conscious thought for sure.
Right. So, and also the natural movement. This is something we've talked about before. And if anybody's really interested in diving more into natural movement, the book Natural Born Heroes really goes into that, amongst other things. It's one of my favorite books. It really is. So Natural Born Heroes by Christopher McDougall. If you're interested, go check it out. He talks about parkour. He talks about the Cretan people and the way that they have natural movement like culturally embedded in their culture, which is pretty awesome. He talks about a World War I military trainer, Georges Hébert, who basically built a big obstacle course / playground for training commandos to go into World War I.
Right.
I don't know if that's accurate. I think the word commando didn't come around to World War II. Anyway, yes, operators.
Yeah. I think he built that for World War II.
It was whatever.
Yeah. It doesn't
I think
matter.
it was built in World War I. But
Got it.
anyway, pretty fascinating stuff. Basically a big obstacle course because he realized the value of that agility, balance, natural movement, functional strength, core strength, upper body strength, mental confidence, which is the next one we're going to talk about when it came to training soldiers.
Right. I mean, you can be so strong, which is wonderful, but what can you do with that? How is that going to translate into everyday life?
And I think he actually just called his program, I think he called it like Système Natural or some natural system.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
Yeah. So, mental confidence.
Mental confidence.
I did mention that one. So you talked about earlier the kind of challenge course type of
Yes.
obstacle course.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your experience with that. Did that boost your mental confidence or did it just scar you for life and actually made you afraid of heights?
No, if anything, like it really boosted your confidence individually, but also as a team.
Your confidence.
I
wasn't there.
But it allowed you to trust that other people in that group were going to come through. So I think it's a great team building exercise, just being able to know that you can do these different obstacles. So there was this one individual and she was terrified of heights. And it was like a rope bridge you had to cross. It was something that, looking at it, it did not look rickety. It was definitely something that was going to hold up with her weight. And you're clipped in at the top, like this big cable that goes in the top. Like even if you lose your footing, you're not going anywhere. And you're tied tight, kind of like rock climbing, how you have like that tight rope. It was tight, so you knew that you weren't going to be going anywhere. You weren't going to be falling. And I remember that she was absolutely terrified. And we were able to just encourage her to go through that. And then she came out and she was so excited that she was able to do that. Like that was
Nice.
That was really amazing just to see that she could look back and overcome this large obstacle. I mean, even something like the different obstacles that we're going to talk about, some of them are a lot easier than others. And just being able to do one of them gosh, that you can actually see balance and motor strength. You're able to see that change so quickly when you're constantly kind of working at it. And so those changes come pretty quickly. So you're actually able to track and see how you can change and how you get better. And that's honestly, when you can see how you get better and you can time it, it does make you feel a lot more confident.
For sure. And fear of heights is definitely one that you can work on with certain obstacles.
Right.
Another big one is certain obstacles you have to commit. Like,
yeah,
you can't hold back and count on your strength or balance or I'm going to figure this out slowly. It's like this obstacle only works when you fling your body and fully commit to getting to the next portion of it.
Right.
One of those, a really simple one of those is a rope swing. One of my favorite obstacles on the Coast Guard Academy's obstacle course was the rope swing because like hardly anybody gets it the first time. It's like, oh, this isn't really something like you do a lot of high school sports, which do not involve a rope swing.
No.
Basically what it is a fairly narrow, fairly shallow, I don't know, chasm of some sort. You run up to it. It's designed in such a way that you have to be running as you approach it to have the momentum to basically launch off the platform.
Do you have to launch off of a platform or a plank?
Oh, it's definitely a pirate plank.
Yeah.
Because we're very pirate-y.
Coast Guard?
No, it's
Okay.
some sort of platform, whatever.
Okay.
You launch off the edge, and like the rope is far enough out there that you can excuse me, you can easily get to it as long as you're running. Like you can't run up, stop, and then gauge the distance.
So it's like 6 feet away. 8 feet.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
I don't know. But like at a run, like your momentum is going to carry you perfectly into the rope. Like not even a sprint, just like as long as you're moving along at a good clip, you're going to reach it. But you have to commit. You can't balk and then try to gauge the distance and then jump because like you're not going to have the momentum to reach the rope. And then the rope's dangling there. You basically grab it and it's like suspended, like swinging from the top.
Yeah.
Your momentum carries you a ways, and then when you feel your momentum, like, you kind of let go and you keep flying and you land on the other side. Really fun, really easy once you get it.
Right.
But it just teaches you that mental confidence to like run and jump and grab a rope, swing, let go, land on the other side, and keep running without missing a beat.
It's amazing though, because you say that, and there are so many individuals who, even if you think about like jumping over even like a bench, like a park bench, that height of something, if you're at a run and you totally, as a human, and you're in decent shape, you totally can just vault over that thing. Like put your hand down on the top and just swing your legs over. And I don't think a lot of individuals, including fair amount of the listeners, realize what the human body is capable of, because because you've never done it doesn't mean that it's not natural and something that we have done for thousands of years.
Well, so much of it is in that neural pathway between the input and the output, which is something that you can train very quickly.
Yeah.
You don't have to spend the next 6 months doing hard physical training to be physically capable of vaulting over a park bench.
No.
Or a barbed wire or chain link fence or even an 8-foot wall. Like most people, like, you know, the physical conditioning is going to help for sure, but it's mostly in the neuro pathway of getting the movement down, the natural movement, just to be able to vault over stuff.
Right.
Or whatever the movement is. So talking about it being mostly in our heads, here's another one. So if I took an 8-foot 2x4 and laid it on the ground, flat, not even on edge, just laid it on the ground.
So you could walk on this
I'll
section.
even give you a 2 by
Okay.
6 so it's even wider. It's
Okay.
that wide.
So 5.5 inch wide board on the ground.
Just laying flat on the ground, and I told you had to walk from one end of the other without falling off.
Oh, you would totally be able to do it.
Pretty easy.
Most people would be able to practically run over it.
Right, without even thinking about it, and certainly not falling off. Now, I realize if we suspend that board between the two ends, it gets bouncy in the middle, which totally changes the balance thing. Okay, but let's say that I build a super solid framed wall, maybe even out of concrete block. Okay, so it's solid, this wall, and it's
Raised off the ground at any level.
at any level, 4 feet, 6 feet, 8 feet. Let's say it's 8 feet tall. Okay. And I take that same 2 by 6 and I lay it along the top of that wall. Okay. Now I tell you, you have to walk from one end of the other along the top edge of that wall. How do you go about walking from one end to the other?
Whoa,
You certainly balk at first. You
Absolutely.
don't just walk across it. You're like,
Arms out. You're
take some deep
walking.
breaths, kind of look at it, see how far down it is, right? Drop your center of gravity, get your arms out, like place your feet. When you do all of that, you're actually making yourself like more likely to fall off of it, for one.
Mm-hmm.
But there was like, from a mechanical, physiological perspective, there was no difference between those two tasks, right?
It was in your head.
It was all in your head. Mm-hmm. So that's another one of those aspects of, what do we call it? The mental confidence
Yes.
that you can gain on an obstacle course, whether it's running along the top edge of a wall or a log. We're going to talk about some of that later, some of the specific obstacles. What else do we have on these why use an obstacle course question? We did write down endurance.
Endurance.
It's actually like, just from a really practical perspective, if you want to go on you want to totally smoke yourself and go on like a 5-mile run, like a really hard 5-mile run, but you don't have time based on however fast you run, throw some obstacles in there and you can get the same workout quicker because it takes more of that endurance.
And it'll increase your balance.
True. And your agility and your mental confidence.
Yes.
And your upper body strength and your core strength and everything.
I think you literally just read off the list.
I did. That's exactly what I did. We do have one more on our list that we wrote down. Last one on the list. I'll let you talk about this one.
It's fun.
It does make life more fun.
Yeah.
It certainly makes your run more fun.
Yeah. It definitely makes your workout less boring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because let's face it, like, unless you really enjoy running, going for a run can be a little bit mentally taxing, especially if you're not like running through some like really pretty trail. If you're just, running through the neighborhood or even worse, around a track, that's just not that exciting.
No.
So yeah, it can definitely make your workout a little more exciting, a little more fun.
All right. Let's talk about our design.
Yes. Design factors. Let's talk about our design factors, and then we'll get into the actual individual obstacles that we want to add, or a whole list of obstacles, and we may or may not add any individual one. We'll definitely add some of them, but it'll give everybody some ideas.
Yeah. And then
I want to add all of them.
I think that would be super fun.
Especially the live fire with barbed wire and
put alligators with like a moat right behind it. And
alligators. Did I ever tell you about
Sharks?
that? I did. I've told you about the alligator obstacle course story.
Oh, yes.
So back in 2002 or so, this summer, I was down in Florida and I was at a park running through their, what do they call them at park? Like their fitness trail kind of thing.
A lot
so
of
they
parks have those.
different obstacles.
Yeah.
And most of them have signs on them with like little silhouettes of people in strange positions doing things. And most of them, you look at it and you're like,
what do I do with this obstacle?
how does this explain what I'm supposed to be doing here? So one of them appeared to be the goal of the obstacle seemed to be to not let your rabbit get eaten by the alligators. So after a little bit of cogitation, there were a couple other guys that I was running through this with.
Oh, it's funny.
If you guys are out there, love you, Scotty. Anyway, we're contemplating what this sign means and where we get the rabbit that we're supposed to safely carry through this gauntlet of alligators. We realized what it actually was the rabbit was supposed to be a small dog, but for some reason they portrayed the small dog with very long ears, making it look more like a rabbit than a small dog, representing the general idea of a pet that you might be walking at the park. And alongside, near this obstacle, there was kind of a little marsh slough. I think slough is more of a Texan term.
Yeah.
No. Bayou? What they call them sloughs.
They call them bayous.
What do they call the ones in town? Are those sloughs or are those
they're
bayous?
bayous.
Those are bayous. Bayou's a Texas thing. Yeah. Anyway, wetland of some sort.
Okay.
Swamp. I don't know what they call them in Florida. Glade. I think they call them glades in Florida, actually. Anyway, and the sign was actually just a warning to be careful so that the alligators that are present in this little city park don't get eaten. No, don't eat your pets as you're taking them for a walk. And the obstacle, where normally the sign telling you how to utilize this obstacle, ended up just being a convenient place to post said sign warning you to not let your pets get eaten by the gators.
So the next question I have, did you ever figure out how to use that obstacle?
I don't even remember what the obstacle was. Like it was
pull-up
probably
bar.
something simple like a pull-up bar with the added challenge of escorting a rabbit through the gator-infested
Marsh.
Anyway,
I love it.
where were we? So, design factors. How did we get off on that tangent?
I don't know.
Alligators. You wanted to add alligators.
Alligators, that's right.
Design factors. My first recommendation would be to make a list of obstacles. Just like brainstorm a list of every single obstacle. Watch some YouTube videos, Google some obstacle courses, and make a list of the obstacles that look like fun.
Right.
Or challenging, depending on whether you're more motivated by fun or challenge, because
Fun.
so we all challenge.
Fun.
Challenge. Anyway, both work. So make a list of all of the obstacles that you think you might want in your obstacle course. Next,
Put them on a planned route.
on a planned route. Yes.
So think of what you want and then organize them based on where you want them to go. I mean, if you have a fairly large area you can use, then plan it. You run to this one, run to that one. But if you have a backyard, there are some really cool obstacle courses that you can just kind of
just in the backyard.
Yeah, and it's like these really cool structures that have like a pull-up bar and then like an angled set of monkey bars going down the side that you could weave in and out of with like monkey bars and rings at the top and like a fireman's pole. Like there are some super cool small creations that you can make to incorporate really cool obstacles so you can still do them on small amounts of area.
Now, if you have a large area like we do, we have, like we talked about, the loop around kind of the low valley in the property that's about a third of a mile.
Right.
Well, exactly a third of a mile, actually, around the loop. So that's kind of where we're going to put most of ours, is basically around that loop, so that you can do a lap, excuse me, a third of a mile lap and hit each of those obstacles along the way. Now, the other side of that, and we're really going to get more into later, like how to do an obstacle course if you don't have all of this space to build your own. The other side of putting them along a planned route is if you are utilizing other obstacles, plan your route on your run to hit those obstacles. If it's like the monkey bars at a park, or the park bench, or the retaining wall that you're going to vault up onto and run along the edge of, and we'll give more suggestions later on some of those urban obstacles that you might be able to find. But locate those and then plan the route of your run so that you're hitting each of those points.
Right.
And yeah, maybe that's on a map. You actually draw it out and figure out, okay, I can run a half a mile loop or whatever and hit these 6 obstacles. That's my obstacle course.
Right.
So,
you can even, we can talk about it later, but you can even switch it up. Do some days and some the others.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
All right. So,
next we have written down, put in as many or as few as you want. So start with 1. No matter how much space you have or don't have, you can always do a pull-up bar.
Right.
If that's your only obstacle and you start and end your run, let's say you throw a pull-up bar or some rings in your garage.
Yeah.
And you start and end your run with pull-ups. That's just turning your whole run experience into a little more of an obstacle course. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you're doing 3 or 4 laps around your neighborhood, so you're passing your house 3 or 4 times. Get that pull-up bar out there, and every time you go past, burn yourself out on pull-ups.
Right. That'd be upper strength as opposed to running, right? Like with your lower.
Right, and then continue on your run.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's nice about being able to design an obstacle course where we are is we can make as many as we want, as few as we want, and we can always add them later too.
Exactly.
So we're going to start with 1. I don't think the pull-up bar is going to be the first one.
We actually have like the first 3 or 4, I think, identified.
We could talk about those soon. So,
did you just give me we'll talk about that offline?
No.
When you hear that in a meeting, you're in trouble.
You're giving me a lot of power there saying that. All right. So we can always add more later. So we can start with a handful that we want, and then we can always add more to do some of the larger, bigger ones at another date.
Mm-hmm. Right, because some of them are, the 50-meter rappel tower. Like that's going to take some effort to.
Yeah, we'll talk about that offline.
Right. There you go. Good use of that tool.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Also, like there's a lot of information out there. You can see there's so many obstacle courses that are out there already, whether they're specific courses that are used by different branches or of the military or military units or anything. A lot of military bases have an obstacle course. So a lot of that information is out there on the exact specs that they use and what they try to accomplish with each of those obstacles. Right. You can find that information. If you were kind of improvising or designing some of your own obstacles, one of my recommendations would be for each obstacle, it needs to target 1 or more of those initial factors that we talked about with why have an obstacle course?
Fun?
I don't think that just fun alone. Okay. It needs to target 2 or more of those factors that we talked about earlier.
So fun and something else.
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good.
Right. So, and actually write that down. Like, as you're designing each obstacle, write down what you're trying to target with that obstacle, whether that's upper body strength, mental confidence, whatever it is.
Balance.
Right? Because let's face it, something like one of those rope bridges that actually has 3 ropes that are like connected, and you put your feet on the bottom one and you have the handrails.
Right.
Like, that's not actually hard at all. That's like, it really doesn't take any balance or any strength or any endurance. Like, other than fun, the only thing that is doing is like mental confidence of going across a 3-rope bridge. Like, what other factor is that really exercising? You have 3 points of contact.
Now, are those
3 or 4 points of contact? That's not really requiring any balance.
Are those ropes attached to each other in any way?
Yeah.
Or are they okay.
Oh, like every 2.5 feet, they have like a V of ropes coming down. So it's like a pretty solid rope structure.
So your foot could like slide off the ropes, but they're connected in places where you could put your foot, so your foot isn't going to slide off the rope.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of the trick with that one, is to like put your feet at the bottom of those V notches so that your foot can't even slide off the rope and you can practically run across the rope bridge.
Trick.
Our rope bridge is going to be a one rope bridge. We'll talk about that later.
Oh, yeah?
Mm-hmm. And how I went across a rope bridge in dress uniform for a good reason.
That's awesome. I want to hear that story. This is actually a story I've never heard before.
Oh, really?
Okay. So each obstacle specifically targeting one or more item. I'm
those functional items of why we're doing the obstacle course. Yeah.
Right.
And write them down.
Like core strength, balance, agility, upper body strength, mental confidence.
You know what we
functional
didn't
strength.
talk about
No.
with the reasons for why to do an obstacle course is challenges, goals, and rewards. So, what?
I thought we kind of
talking
briefly
about that
talked
offline?
about that.
Well, sort of. Like it can be challenging. Like you can have your obstacle course and you can time yourself, and then you can have a goal of dropping your time to a certain level and rewarding yourself when you obtain that goal.
$5.
Also, if you have kids,
Ooh.
you can, and they're engaging in whatever obstacle course with you,
Right.
or on their own if you're a lazy slob.
With helmets.
You can offer your kids rewards for achieving their goals on the obstacle course.
Well, it's interesting you bring up kids, because kids, a lot of times, honestly, in the world that we're living, they don't get a whole bunch of movement. Like, so getting them out, getting them moving is really, really good. And then what's really interesting about obstacle courses is that they have different sensory inputs with an obstacle course. So,
Splinters.
Splinters. But I mean, they don't necessarily touch logs a lot or pipes or that sort of thing. And so you can actually use those, and you're making them do different movements, and you're exposing kids to different sensory inputs, and you're engaging different muscle groups than they otherwise would if they're just riding their bikes or running around playing. And so basically these courses can help get kids better at making adjustments on the fly. So like their agility, right? So if they're finding that they're playing tag and there's rocks here and there, they can jump over them, that sort of thing. That also helps with fine and gross motor skills too. So you're using your hands and your fingers. That's kind of what we consider in wrists. Those are fine motor skills. And then the gross motor skills are like your legs and arms and core. So it can help with all of those things, or gripping onto things and grabbing things. And they also have coordination between the two sides of their body too. So like bilateral coordination, or basically both sides of the body are working together to do something. I mean, typing, you have to use both sides to create something. You're creating some sort of document. Same thing with playing piano. Those are things that a lot of times individuals, especially children, have difficulties doing, just because it is so tedious to be able to use both sides to accomplish some sort of goal.
We're going to wrap it up there for this week, and we'll be back next week with the conclusion of this discussion. So, like we talked about, in the next half of the discussion, we really get into the specific obstacles that we're designing and building, and why we're using each of those obstacles, and some real specific recommendations for all of you as far as how you can improvise your own obstacle course no matter where you live. So, we will be back with that half of the discussion next week. Until then, have a great week. Go jump over some park benches and pursue your mastercraft. Bye. Theme music for the Master of None podcast is Club Seamus by Kevin MacLeod. Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. CreativeCommons.org. If you need some of your own original music, go check out Kevin's other work at his website, Incompetech.com.